The most impressive thing of Cursor is when in a few minutes you can build something that would take weeks. And that is the case of building an UI, at least for me. So let me show you how I quickly build an UI for one of the APIs that I've been building. So if you have been following along, you know that recently I published 2 videos where I show you how to build a rag using Azure OpenAI and also using .NET. But that is not the point of this video. But during one of those videos, I mentioned that I could come here and show you how I could build an UI on top of that API that I built. Okay, so if you are interested in seeing that process of building the rag, you can find a link in the top. But now let's take a look at how I would quickly build an UI for that API. First, for those that are not familiar with those videos or for those that need a recap, let's take a look on what that API is doing. It's quite simple. So this is a set of HTTP requests that I have, all for the same endpoint, okay? I can call this ask action, and there I can provide a question and I will get an answer back. And what will happen is that based on that question, that will be my prompt, I will ask the LLM to answer, but based on a set of facts, a set of documents that I will provide. So that's the idea of the RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. So I'm collecting all of those documents from my blog. Okay, I have a set of markdown files and I'm using them as an input for this RAG. In one of those videos, I show how to move those files into Postgres database, generate the embeddings, and then use that as an input for our RAG. What I will be doing here today is not that part of the RAG. I will show you how I quickly build something like an UI, a web application for an endpoint like this, okay? So how can we start? One thing that I like to do when I'm about to build an UI is to think, what's the typical user experience that I want, okay? And in this case, it's quite simple. I have just one simple question that I will ask and I should see an answer. So I'm thinking about something quite simple, like having an input, and that input is what I will type the prompt. And also I should have, for example, a button. Let's say that it's called ask, and that one should have a different background. So let's say it would be something like this. So here I can type the thing that I will be asking. Okay, let's give it an example. And then I will get an answer somewhere here, but maybe it can be simply just adding some text. So since I want to add some text, let's do the following. Let's get a lorem ipsum, paste it here, change the color. Okay, and you might be thinking, why the hell having all this work, okay? And I will show you why. But the next thing that I want to do is to create the project where I will be generating that UI. I like to start by doing myself the first step, that is creating the folder and creating the project. Why do I do that? One thing that I like to do is to have control of the technologies that I will be using. And I don't like to simply say, okay, generate an UI for this. Okay, I want to be quite specific on the things that I want to use. So in this case, what I will be doing is that I will go into Cursor and I will open the terminal. Okay, and on the terminal, what I will do is that since I have there the other projects, the ones for the API, I will create a new one named reg with Azure -web, something like this. Now inside, what I will do is that I will create my project. The project that I will be using is a React application. So what I like to do on such cases is to go online, go to the website of that project and try to find what's the most recent way of creating those projects. So according to the documentation, I can decide to use either the router from Next.js or React router. I like to use React router for a simple reason. I'm used to it. So what I will do is that I will run that command and it will install all the packages needed. Just answer those questions that it will start asking. Okay, and it's done. Something that I like to do is, since the UI tends to be quite focused, I like to focus my cursor on that UI alone, because it simplifies then the process of, for example, referencing something to give context. So what I will do is that I will open exactly that folder. Okay, this way I only have that in context. So what I will do next is that I will start prompting my cursor IDE about the thing that I want to do. So important thing, let's give some context, okay? The first thing that I will say is that let's build an UI for a simple endpoint that I have. Next, what I want to say is what's that endpoint about, okay? So what I will say is that the API exposes an endpoint to ask questions. This is an example of the request, okay? And I provide an example of that possible request. Now, what I want to say is to provide some context on how do I want things to look like, okay? So here, I can do something like the following. I can say, let's build an UI that provides the same experience of Google, for example, since I have that box seems related. So let's build an UI in the style of Google. And now what I can do, take one more step, is to provide an example. So what I like to do on those cases is to pick the thing that I want and then generate an image with it. So you can do simply a print screen, or if you are using something like a diagramming tool, it might be the only thing that you need to do. You can pick the region that you want and export it as an image. Once you have the image, grab that image, go to cursor and upload it there. You can see here on the top that the image is attached. So I will tell cursor that please make sure that the style is kind of like this one. So I will say I attach the mockup of what it should look like. One thing about the recent versions of Cursor is that you usually will find here that the agent is auto. So if you have this option enabled, it means that Cursor will try to find which is the best model to ask for this, okay? On this type of questions, usually I like to use Claude 3.7. Okay, I have a great experience with it, so I will try that one. Okay, and let's use this as the starting point to see what it will start producing. So once you do it, since I didn't provide any context, you will see that it will start reading items from our application, trying to find where it needs to touch. Once it has all of that information, he will start generating the code that you will need, because now he understands the basic structure of your project. So you can see that is now already generating the components. And one thing that I know is that by the simple fact that I first created the project with React, he took a look into the package.json and into the structure of the project, that now he knows that I'm using React. So that is quite helpful, because now I don't need to think about, okay, let's use a different version. Let's use Angular instead of React or something like that. Okay, he keeps producing the code. Eventually might ask to do things like this, to run a given command. For example, if it needs to install a given package, you will ask for that. What I will do is that I will run this one. It's basically asking to run the application using the dev, run dev. Okay, and let's open it. And here it is. Okay, so this is the first version that it came up with. Notice that is basically the thing that I provide the mock. What might be a problem in some cases, okay, for example, now I want this to be my answer, okay, I don't want that to say best free tools for diagrams, but let's see what happens when I perform a request. For example, let's send this question: do I have anything on applying the result pattern in C#? Ask, and I got an error. Why do I have an error? If we go to the network, okay, we have a problem with the course. So what I will quickly do that we are going to enable course in this case, use that policy, and then go to the app settings. Should be on the development, but I don't want to show you my connection strings. So there, add the web application endpoint, that in my case is exactly that one, okay? if we run this thing again and ask the question again, okay, it's saying no answer found. Why? So if we go to our component, we can see that it's considering that eventually the answer will be in a JSON format, what is not the case on that API. Why that is happening, I didn't provide that context. So I could quickly come here and say, for example, provide this as context, add to chat, and ask him change the response handling since the answer will be text instead of JSON. Instead of saying answer, let's say response, API response. For these small things, now I like to use the auto mode because often it will find a faster way to answer. Okay, you can see now he's handling it as the text. So let's accept it. The application is still running. That means that if we try again, now we have that answer. Okay, so now what we'll do is that we'll start reviewing the UI of this, trying to adjust it to what we are looking for. First things that I want to do, okay, when handling this answer, I want it to consider the line breaks, for example, and to remove the double quotes. So on cursor, what I will say, go back into that component, and I will ask him, okay, consider the fact that the text comes with double quotes and that there's line breaks there that can be something like /n. Okay, let's see what happens. By a simple text like this, he understands things like removing those things, doing escaping some characters on our answer as well. I can review the changes, can adjust some things if I want, or I can simply come here and say, let's apply it. Accept it, ask it again. Okay, you can see it's much better. So what I want to work on now, is on the default things that you can see here, because I'm looking to that input. I don't want it saying best free tools for diagrams. So let's ask him a set of different things. What I will do is that for this search component, that is our default, the placeholder of the input should be what do you want to know today, for example. Also, other thing, I don't want the lorem ipsum. That was just an example of a possible output. Other things that I can do, the loading, I want a spinning wheel. I want a spinning wheel on the loading. Let him work, accept it, go back there, okay, and now it's much better. Any article about Rust, for example, ask, okay, spinning wheel, and we have the answer here. Okay. So we can keep iterating. And the other thing that I like to do is to give examples of things that I like on other websites, and I want to adjust this to look like those. For example, we mentioned Google, right? So why not grabbing something like this? So I can do something quite simple, that is pasting the image and asking, can you make the search box look like Google? Okay, it's proposing those changes. And if we go to the application, even before accepting those changes, we can now see how it will look like. So if I don't like it, I can always reject it. Some things that I don't like is that, for example, now I have those icons there and I don't want them, right? So I can say icons like the microphone don't make sense on my use case. Even then, I like the style, so let's keep that part. Okay, it realizes that only the search icon should be there. And this is the type of experience that I like in Cursor, is the fact that I have the AI interacting with the code that I have. I can reference a given part of the code. I don't need to be copy pasting things from one place to another. Even then, often using something like Claude directly and then copying the things into my ID works quite well, especially on the first step. But then when I start iterating to improve those small things like the ones that you are doing now, I think that this is a better user experience. So if we go there, now is much better. Let's see if when I type something like hello and press enter, if something happens, and it's happening, okay, it's working as I would expect. So now I can accept all the changes, okay, and I have the basics of my UI, okay, with just this simple interaction, providing some context and all of that. Now, what I would need to do is that I would need to refactor this code. There's things here that I don't need anymore, for example. So I know that this thing is not being used, so we could throw it away. I could come here and, for example, ask questions like, for example, in the context of a line, I can go there and say, how can I make this endpoint configurable? By the fact that I'm using this side pane, what will happen is that it will not only suggest the changes that I need to make here, but also understand if I need to create something more, like having a configuration file. Okay, so what it's saying is that, okay, first step, apply this to the text, apply this to the search, and on my git ignore, I could ignore the .env, okay? It knows all of that. So let's accept those changes. Let's create our env file, and now let's run the application again. Okay, let's go to test it once again, and let's ask, can I debug C# with Cursor AI? Okay, it says that yes, you can debug. There's these steps that are outlined in this guide. Okay, so it's working as expected. So this is the basic process that I take to start building my UIs. When it's something simple, I like to start this way. Okay, I will ask based on an example what I want to do, but first I will create the project. Okay, and then I will start doing that. For example, other thing that can work is to start by creating the project. And if you have a template of the style that you want to use, you create, for example, one or two components inside of that application. And then when you ask to bring a given functionality like this one, you say, okay, let's build this component, but let's preserve the style of the rest of the application and build it like this. Okay, that way you don't need to be adjusting the things to what you want in the future, because you already have a baseline and you can say, okay, let's pull back the information from the other components and let's use that style. Okay. As you can see, you quickly can apply something like this. You can quickly create the baseline of your components. It's important to say that during the process, you should be reading the code that is being produced and understanding if there's something here that is wrong. It's quite common to see code being left behind. For example, when you give a given prompt and then you will come back with a set of code, then you adjust the code because you adjust the prompt asking, okay, I don't want this, I want that. Eventually, I start noticing that I have functions that will be living there and we need to keep cleaning the code and all of that. So you can see that it does a decent job. It might not be perfect. For example, some things that I could be doing is, for example, trying to work instead of having multiple use states, maybe using only one. It depends on the implementation that you want to have here. But for example, I will try to do things like pull out methods to do this type of handling of the text. There's many things that could be done here. But the cool thing is that you can quickly build a component, test it, interact with it, have a prototype working of what you are looking for, and also be able to provide images or examples and ask, okay, build something in this style. So even not having skills of a designer, you can quickly build something that looks good and that will be interacting with your API quite easily. So I hope you find this one useful. And if you want to see more things that you can do with Cursor, I think you'll like to watch this video right here, where I show you my first interaction with Cursor and how impressed I was with many of the things that we can do with it. So I will see you in the next one.